yeah, away, away. Yeah, 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 away, away. Hey, hey, away, away. Hey, hey, away, away. Yahweh, away, away. Yahweh, away, away. Yahweh, away, away. I wanted to tell you guys a story, another wildlife story, helping wildlife story. So welcome to a new Tim Talk. Back in the 80s, I've talked about this before, I ran a wildlife rescue. And one day, this is the strangest thing, you're never going to believe this story. I'm in the Bay Area, it's about an hour away from where I worked in Santa Cruz. The Bay Area is near San Francisco, for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm at a conference on how to take care of birds, the seabirds particularly. They get covered with oil from oil spills from tankers. And I get a call in the middle of the conference that a massive oil spill has happened back near Santa Cruz. I need to go back now to do some good work cleaning and saving as many seabirds as possible. Now, as I get back there, the way I tell this story is, first of all, we needed a facility big enough to handle, because I saw what had happened is a barge, an oil barge, had filled up with oil in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I guess it wasn't put back together correctly, and it leaked oil. It's called bunker C oil, thick, gooey oil, for 100 miles along the coast. And that's a coast that is a national wildlife refuge filled with seabirds of all kinds. Pelicans, murres, cormorants, gulls, you name it. This was a huge catastrophe, folks. All because of human error. And basically probably laziness. So I get back to Santa Cruz, and the place some of the oil was heading to was a place called Moss Landing power plant. And they ran and created power for the people in the area by burning diesel gas fuel. So they offered, kindly from their point of view, they offered us a huge space to take care of the injured birds as they came in. And this was a big job. I mean, we had about 50, 60 volunteers at any given time. It was a 24/7 job. We had people that would scour the beaches and find the birds that had washed up, that were covered with oil. And they would catch them, put them in boxes, and bring them to us. And then we would wash them. Now, the first thing you got to know is seabirds they're able to live in the ocean because their feathers are waterproof. If they soaked up ocean water, their skin would get too cold, they'd get hypothermia, and they'd die. They keep their feathers preened with their beaks, and they stay clean, and so the water doesn't soak through. Now, a few different birds, like cormorants, sometimes the water soaks through a little, and their way of dealing with it is they get up on a rock, put their wings out, and dry off. But birds like murres and things, they literally are in the water most of their life, except when they come out to breed. And they literally fly underwater, and they catch other fish to eat. You can imagine when one of these birds is swimming underwater or on the surface, and that oil gets on them. And they try to preen it off. Well, and it's gross, too. Imagine they're digesting that. It's a poison. Most die in the ocean. They drown. We don't ever see it. They're just not visible to us. The few that do make it wash up on shore, where they're often attacked and eaten by predators, or they just die there, washing back and forth in the waves. Or if they're lucky, a volunteer, an earth caretaker, finds them, brings them to a wildlife rescue like ours, and we take them from there. Now, one of the hardest things I ever did in my life is I was in charge of this operation. So I had to do what's called triage. I can imagine what it would be like in a time of war for a doctor to do that with men and women who are coming in from the battlefield. I was doing it with birds. And I'd have to make the decision whether we could wash them and potentially save them, or if they were too far gone. And the ones that were too far gone, I would have to euthanize them, put a needle in them and kill them. And I'd have to make that decision. And it burned my soul. Oh my God, I still see every one of them looking at me with their bright eyes saying, all I was doing was living in the ocean catching fish. Why did this happen to me? That's what I heard them saying. Why did this happen to me? Why? What did I do to you? And then I give them a blessing and my good wishes. There'd be another volunteer or two holding them, give them their hearts and love too. And I'd put the needle in and I'd put them to sleep and send them off to the spirit world. That was a tough one, boy. I cannot tell you how tough. I don't know what to say about it more. And then there were the ones that we thought we could save. Then we put them into a sink and we wash them with a detergent, getting all the oil off. Can you imagine a wild animal having to be held by humans? Have empathy for a minute. Feel it from their point of view. What it would be like to have all these humans and these bright lights. You're out of your element. You're being held and washed and scrubbed with soap and water. Imagine that. Practice empathy from the beginning, from the time the oil hit them on, and become that bird. Look at the world from their point of view. Now, when the volunteers and myself brought compassion, love, and heart, I know that helps. Because I know that all animals feel and respond to that. And that was probably the great thing that kept it okay. And then once the birds were done being washed, we'd dry them off, and if they looked good, then a volunteer would take and release them back into the ocean, providing it had been cleaned up. That's another story. We were able to save about 10,000 birds. I could only imagine how many hundred thousands died. But I have one little story to wrap up here for you. We stayed for about a month, by the way, too. And there were a lot of tears. But this story was something else. This game, as I was doing triage, I also had to identify the birds. And a bird came in, a sea duck. And I made a mistake, and I identified it as the wrong kind of a duck. And we weren't feeding it the right food, and it started to starve. And a volunteer brought the bird to me, and I saw it was emaciated and starving, and it just wasn't going to make it. So we'd have to euthanize it. And about the same time that happened, a fish and game warden came in for the California Fish and Game Department. And he was kind of overseeing what we were doing, and he's in charge of wildlife in the state of California. And I knew him. I'd helped him before on some stings protecting salmon from poachers and stuff. So I'd had some good times out in the woods with him doing that, helping wildlife. And him and I, we just looked at each other, and we took that bird. It was no word said. And we walked out the door with the bird. And all the emotions were coming up for him and me. The weight of what was happening. And we go and we sit out in the power plant, holding the duck, the sea duck that was dying. And it's a surreal world. It's like something from a movie, a space futuristic movie. There's lights flashing and, because it was a power plant. It was just crazy. And we sit there next to each other and we just bawl our eyes out. Two grown men bawling our eyes out. And it turns out, strangely enough, you think about it, that sea duck gave its life up to inspire us to be better people. the real healing there, we got it from the duck. And then the duck died in my arms, and we gave him a good blessing. And but what that duck did, and the timing of all of the pain and the sorrow and the craziness of why does this even have to happen? I mean, we were sitting there going, why does this have to happen? And then we both picked ourselves up and got back to work doing what we needed to do to care for the planet the way that we needed to do it. But often the greatest teachers are the animals or the trees or the plants. And if you just open up to being a student and allowing yourself to be taught, so many wonderful things can happen for you. And it's not always in intense situations like an oil spill. It can just be a nice walk in the woods. Just be open. That was something that changed my life forever, that experience. Thanks for listening. Oh. Go away. Yeah, 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 away. Hey, hey, away. Hey, hey, away. Yeah, away.